The book's available on Amazon.com and also from my publisher, BearManorMedia.com. Bear like a panda bear, BearManorMedia.com. And in Australia, I think it's a store called Minotaur that's an entertainment store. It's actually on the bookshelves there because Australia loves Bewitched.
Oh, yeah. But you know what? We got a large listenership in Australia, believe it or not.
I have a lot of Australia fans, and I love them, not fans, friends. And one day I'm going to make it down there to meet all of them.
Yeah. That's one thing I always wanted to do, but I never was able to do it. It was go to Australia. But I tell you what, a lot of people listen to our show on it. I mean, we're not just on the internet. We're on radio stations, unlike, podcasts and stuff. So we cover all this stuff. Well, how many pages is this book?
Well, there was 8 seasons, 254 episodes. So I wrote over 700 pages.
Oh, wow. So it's not going to be a weekend read.
Oh, no. Because something else that I did that really got me interested in it was that there was so much going on in the world that was dark and depressing that was contrasted with how light and magical the show was. And in fact, Bewitched went into production on November 22nd, 1963, the day that Kennedy got shot. And many other things happened during the course of the show. There was the Vietnam War going on still, and the race riot. Martin Luther King was assassinated, as well as Bobby Kennedy. Woodstock happened. The moon landing happened. So many, many interesting things happened, and I mentioned those things in the book, too, as they happened along with what episode aired that week.
Oh, wow. And it was, what, a half an hour show?
Yeah, half-hour comedy.
Oh, wow.
And it originally aired on Thursday nights, and then towards the end it moved to Wednesdays, and then they finally killed it off on Saturdays.
Yeah, usually Friday and Saturdays is like the death, role for a TV show.
Yeah. But it did really good. It was the number 2 show when it premiered, just behind Bonanza.
Oh, yeah, that's another show that, went down in history that you see every day. And you know what? I hate to say, Bonanza, when you watch it, it's as fresh now as it was when the 60s when it was made.
Yeah, there's actually a Bewitched connection. During the first season of Bewitched, Chevrolet was a sponsor for both of the series, and so there was a 5-minute commercial that aired at the end of one of the Bonanzas where they're in Virginia City, and Agnes Moorehead, Elizabeth Montgomery, and Dick York appear as their characters, showing off one of the new Chevys, along with I think it's Robert Culp that was from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. So it's a really cool commercial that was in color when Bewitched was just in black and white.
Yeah, okay. Well, I finally found your mistake now. Robert Culp. He was a friend of mine. I got to know him like the last 6 months of his life. He was very famous for a TV show called I Spy.
Oh, there you go. Sorry.
They were the first TV show that had a white actor and a black actor playing major roles, equal roles. They were the first TV show ever filmed worldwide on location. And then on top of it, they were the very first ones that used wireless transmitters and microphones when they were out in like Hong Kong or in Greece or Sicily doing this show. It was so interesting how I've actually had a friend of mine, Mark Cushman, on the show numerous times. He's wrote books on, I hate to say it, Robert Culp, and he wrote books on Star Trek.
Okay.
So, very interesting. Now, back scenes. Do you have any in your book about anything about the scripts, anything of the, making each episode or making an episode what was like?
Well, when I found stories about the behind the scenes, I would include them in my book, and but I mainly just focused on the episodes themselves and also what was going on in the world. But there are a few behind the scenes things, especially because Elizabeth put a lot of her own life into the show. You mentioned your friend, Mr. Cushman, that wrote those books. Elizabeth's cousin that I mentioned earlier, Panda, is a Cushman. And so there's several times on the show where the Darren's account is ran by a Mr. Cushman. And there's also times where Elizabeth mentioned places in Paterson, New York, which is where the Cushmans had a farm, and she would spend her summers there. So a lot of times, which takes place in Paterson, New York, and then other times it takes place in Westport, Connecticut.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder what it was like to be on the set when they were, making each one of the... And, I'm just curious how long did they have to make each episode?
They did it all within a week, and I've met many of the actors that were on the show. I never had the chance to meet Elizabeth or Dick York or Dick Sargent or Agnes Moorehead, of course, but I met Bernard Fox and Aaron Murphy that played little Tabitha, and her brother Adam, played by David Lawrence. He was just a baby when he was on there, but many of the guest stars that I've met, I've not heard of one of them that said that it was a tense time on the set at all. Everybody said it was a great time, and they did it all within a week period. But the William Asher and the production crew had everything down to a T so that they could get all the magic and effects done in a precise way, and it looks really good even over 50 years later.
Yeah, isn't that scary? I don't know what your age is. I'm 68 years old. And I remember.
Oh, you don't sound like it.
That's because I take Geritol. But anyway, I find, the show back then was fresh. When I watched the reruns, which I don't watch that often, but I occasionally, get bored of watching Star Trek every night. Yeah. Occasionally I'll watch Bewitched because there's some episodes I really, really loved. And I think the show was ahead of its time. Especially here's this witch marrying a mortal. And then, they had to always try to work, their relationship because her family didn't want her married to, Darren. And they made that so obvious, like her mother, Elizabeth, Moorhead.
Agnes Moorehead.
Yeah, would always come back and say you or something. It was, I loved it.
Yeah. And it was a very ahead of its time, and in that time where there was the racial tensions, it was kind of a nod to the racial tensions that were going on, that Samantha was from a different race, and her mother and her family looked down on Darren, and they actually, Elizabeth's favorite episode dealt with the race problems that were actually going on in the world. It was the 7th season Christmas episode called Sisters at Heart, and it was written by the 10th grade English class of Thomas Jefferson High School in Los Angeles, and it was about Tabitha being friends with one of the Darren's coworkers who happens to be black, his daughter Lisa, and they were pretending like they were sisters in the park, and somebody told them they couldn't be sisters because they weren't the same color. And so Tabitha ends up making them sisters by putting black spots on her and white spots on Lisa. And later on, Samantha tells them that they don't need to be the same color to be sisters, that all men are brothers, even if they're girls. And so then Tabitha switches them back to being regular colors. But that was a really cute episode, and I met the Don Marshall. He was on Star Trek. He played Lisa's father on there. I met him and the lady that played his wife, and they both said that they were very impressed with the script that was written by these kids from high school, and how it was handled on Bewitched, which was very odd for that time. It was it's coming up on 50 years of 50th anniversary of that episode this Christmas, but at the time, shows like All in the Family had just barely started, and so there wasn't anything really that was tackling those issues.
No, I will tell you this. Gene Roddenberry came out with on Star Trek that one of the episodes was a white and black alien, and he was running away from the other alien, and basically the one alien wanted to terminate the other one because he wasn't the same. And in one part of the episode, Captain Kirk says, well, what's this thing about? And the guy goes, well, can't you see? And he goes, yeah, you're white and black. He's white and black. But I'm white on this side, and he's black on this side. And that's how they were doing the racist thing. It was a message put out, like white and black.
Right.
Yeah, and it was just that little scene, the explanation that, well, you know what? He's not black on the same side as I am. He's not white on the same side as me, so he's inferior. It was just interesting how they did that in the 60s. And then the episode of Bewitched and a couple other shows after that, All in the Family, really broke the ground.
Right.
So do you plan to write any other books on any famous shows?
Well, I had been in the midst of writing an I Dream of Jeannie history book, which is a show very similar to Bewitched, but also has its own merits. But in the middle of writing that, my father passed away, and it threw me into a depression that I'm just barely getting out of. So me and my co-author, Judy Moore, we're going to get back on it. Her mother also passed away in those intervening years. And so, when your parents pass away, it kind of hits you hard. So I'll be getting back onto it, and I'll have another book coming.
It's hard when you lose any loved one, especially parents. But the older you get, you're going to see more of that happening. But going back to I Dream of Jeannie, I tell you, I was with Barbara Eden. I had the biggest crush ever on a woman as her. Yeah. I mean, beautiful woman. And I tell you, that show kind of made me, kind of fit in like with Bewitched. I mean, they both were magical.
Yeah. What I love about I Dream of Jeannie, just to get off topic kind of, but I love that there was Jeannie and her magic, and her master was astronaut Tony Nelson that dealt with science at NASA. And so it was kind of a weird thing having a genie that has magic that goes against all the scientific rules, working with this kind of scientist, Tony Nelson. I really love that. And my dad, actually, I wanted to bring up my dad too. He used to listen to Art Bell's show all the time, and so he would have been tickled pink if I was going to be on a show like yours. But he worked at Area 51 back in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And he also was at NASA when they did the moon landing, and I actually found a letter from, he was also in the Army, and I found a letter from NASA asking the Army to excuse him for the week of the moon landing because he had a very important part in it. He fixed the radio receivers at NASA in Houston.
Oh, wow. That's something you can be very proud of your dad for doing. And I want to thank I want to thank you for your dad, the service he gave to the country.
Well, thank you. He loved aliens and stuff, and back to Area 51, he always told us there was never any aliens out at Area 51. I don't know why they say that. And we always said, oh, Dad, we know you were sworn to secrecy, so you'll never tell.
Yeah, but, he never did tell, huh?
No, he did not.
Interesting. You mentioned Art Bell. Art was a friend of mine, and I'll tell you that was a big shock with his passing, because I talked to him like 3-4 days before he passed on, and I tell you, it was a big shock. And what was interesting? There was a book. I always wanted to get it, but I never got it because because of having 8 kids and being married, and money was tight off and on. It was the book called The Global Superstorm that him and Whitley wrote. And I was going to buy it, but I never, at the time it came out, I couldn't afford it. And I was joking around. The last time I talked to Art, I said, I'm going to have to go get that book